I stumbled upon the haunted Natchez Slave Quarters where 4 OVERSERS were brutally dismembered. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill snaked down my spine, shadows wrapping around me like clammy fingers. I stood there, frozen, breathless. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage like it wanted out. That it was supposed to be a casual exploration, an adventure to share with friends later. The sun was setting, but instead of fading light, darkness settled in thick and suffocating. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. Whispers swirled in the corners of my mind, as if the very walls were calling to me. I couldn't help but get drawn in. The quarters themselves were haunting. Cracked wooden beams groaned overhead, creaking under the weight of history. Dust danced in the faint light that filtered through grimy windows. I could almost hear the echo of chains dragging on the ground, reminding me of those who had suffered here, and those who had enforced it. What had happened to the overseers? What made their presence linger so heavily in this cursed place? Then came the noises. At first, just the distant sound of wind rattling against the old structure. But soon, a low whisper floated through the air, barely discernible, sending a shiver up my spine. "Get out," it seemed to plead. I shook my head, the sound crashing against my ears like glass shattering. I told myself it was nothing. But then the door behind me slammed shut with a thunderous bang. My heart leaped into my throat as darkness flooded in. Panic gripped me. I turned, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the doorknob. It wouldn't budge. It was like the walls themselves were holding me captive, hungry for the stories I'd unwittingly entered. Another sound, a small thud, came from the corner of the room. My pulse raced. Dread coiled in my gut like a snake. I caught a glimpse of momentous shadow flitting just beyond the edge of the murky light. My breath hitched. Was it just my imagination? Or was something lurking in the dark? As I strained to see, a low, guttural grunt echoed through the quarters, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I was not alone. The shadow grew closer, darker, more defined. My heart pounded louder, drowning out every rational thought. I wanted to scream, but nothing came. I was paralyzed by terror. Just then, the floor beneath me creaked as if something was drawing near. I braced myself against the wall, my back pressing against the cold, rough wood. What horrors awaited me? Time slowed, the air thick with impending doom. And that's when I saw a figure, tall and menacing, its eyes glinting like polished steel in the dark. Then blackness. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I was engulfed in an impenetrable blackness, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your very soul. My heart drummed against my ribcage, a frantic beat in the oppressive silence that followed. The figure, now obscured, lingered like a ghost of the past, its presence too palpable to be imagined. I strained to see, fingers outstretched into the void that seemed to pulse with an unholy energy, tightening around my throat. "Get out," the whisper returned, sharper now, closer, as though it bled directly from the walls. My body screamed for movement, but I stood frozen, battling the urge to bolt into the yawning abyss ahead. I couldn't tell where the sound originated, but it felt as if the very floor beneath me was made of terrible memories, echoing the cries of those who had fallen prey to the horrors of yesteryears. A sudden gust of wind tore through the quarters, flooding the room with a rancid stench. It carried with it the taste of iron and desperation. I could hear damp, shuffling footsteps approaching, hauntingly absent, like a sorrowful melody playing from the depths of despair. Instinctively, I tucked my chin to my chest and squinted into the dark, hoping my eyes would adjust. Instead, I felt a hot breath wash over me, stinging my skin, Had it been mere inches away? I staggered backward, a shroud of panic surrounding me. My hand fell on what felt like a rusty iron bar, a reminder of the shackles that held so many captive. Somehow, it provided me a tether to reality, a solid thing in a world built of shadows. As I gripped it, the breath turned into a muffled snarl, a sound that clawed at my sanity, thrumming through the air with rage and pain. The shadows shifted and morphed, forming twisted, anguished faces. They pressed forward, blurring the edges of the reality around me. They reached out with hands that clawed through the darkness, beckoning me to them, promising secrets meant only for the damned. Each whisper grew louder, filling my head with a cacophony of anguish. "Join us!" I lunged toward the door with a primal scream, the doorknob cool against my damp palm. But the door resisted, a mockery of escape, trapping me within its malicious grip. I turned desperately, eyeing the shadows closing in, probing for an exit that didn't exist. The air shimmered with a malevolence I could feel crawling across my skin. Then, an echoing crash shattered the silence. Something heavy had fallen in the main room outside. The sounds of creaking would followed, punctured by an unholy wail. Something was freeing itself in this cursed place. Moments later, I heard thumping footsteps, deliberate and rhythmic, approaching the quarters, shaking the very foundation beneath me. It was coming for me. A sense of dread coiled within my stomach as I realized it was not just the whispers that sought my presence, but some unfathomable force aching to make me a part of its story. As if the blood of those overseers called out for more souls, I turned back to the rickety door, panic clawing at my throat as I twisted the knob with desperate strength, but resistance remained. The pounding grew louder, the spirit's deep growls harmonizing with the thundering sound as I kicked the door. It splintered at the edge, light pooling through the cracks like a portal to salvation. Just as the latch gave way, flinging the door open, I caught sight of Ida's figure standing in the dim light beyond, features obscured save for eyes glimmering like candle flames. Behind it, shadows writhed and twisted, ringing from the surging darkness the anguished cries of those once trapped within. And then, I was pulled backwards, a cold grip clutching my ankle. I realized, with a horror that ignited my very spirit, it was not just the whispers that beckoned me. I was no longer a mere spectator in this nightmare. Something truly ancient and vile had chosen me as its next victim. With panic-stricken breaths, I felt myself sink, the earth beneath me shifting as skeletal hands gripped tighter. I screamed into the dark, but the echo swallowed my cries whole. The last thing I saw before the light vanished entirely was the figure striding toward me, eyes like twin flames of malevolence, and I realized too late. I had awakened something that could never be appeased. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that sent a shudder through my very soul, leaving me trapped in this cursed darkness, with no way to tell if I was bound for the very horrors that claimed the overseers or something far worse. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating cloak that stilled my heart and extinguished the feeble flame of hope that flickered within. I felt the weight of the earth above pressing down, a sinister reminder of the grave I was destined to share with those who had vanished in this place. The cacophony of whispers wrapped around me like a lover's breath, intimate yet terrible, sweet yet laced with decay. Pulled deeper into the void, I floundered against the skeletal hands that gripped my ankle, their gnarled fingers probing and tugging, testing my resolve. A visceral terror surged, a primal instinct to flee, but how could one escape what dwelled beneath the surface of nightmares? The dim light of the door disappeared, swallowed by an insatiable abyss, leaving me with only the muted thrum of my heartbeat and the gnawing dread of what awaited me next from the surrounding shadows. I felt the gaze of the unseen figure, its fiery eyes now studying me with an intensity that threatened to dissolve my sanity. "You should not have come here," it rasped, its voice a chilling echo of the cries I had just fled. With each syllable, the ground trembled. Echoes of despair roared back in reply. Suddenly, the skeletal fingers released me as the trap was sprung. I fell forward onto the cold, hard floor, gasping for breath as I quickly scrambled away from the malignant presence. Something clattered in the darkness behind broken glass. Perhaps? I twisted around, my heart racing, expecting to see the figure looming over me. Instead, I was met with a scattering of jagged memories swirling around the room like spirits trapped in their own hell. There, fluttering in and out of sight, were silhouettes, faces twisted in horror, hands reaching out in helplessness. Each figure was accompanied by a name I could not recall. Yet they beckoned with such urgency I felt a pull toward them, an intrinsic understanding of their plight. A female form, clad in tattered remnants of a dress, stared at me with sunken eyes. As she opened her mouth to cry out, I stumbled back, the vision dissipating, cascading into mere shadows like smoke on the wind. Panic clawed at my throat. I found my voice. It burst forth like a dam shattering. "What do you want from me?" I screamed, the darkness swallowing my words whole. My question hung in the suffocating air, unanswered, an invitation to an oncoming storm. The ground shifted beneath my feet. Was it a tremor, or a visceral response from the souls imprisoned here? Each shifting grain of earth vibrated with a threat, carrying with it the remnants of those whose lives were snuffed out too soon. I squinted into the dark, feeling the energy pulsate, the shadows gathering thickly around me as they threatened to smother my very will to resist. Without warning, the walls of the room seemed to breathe, pulling closer, squeezing the space until I thought I might suffocate entirely. In a heartbeat, a vision came forth, vivid and agonizing. I was there once again, in the light of day, standing upon an unyielding ground, the cries of the executed overseeing me, hammering my senses with vibrancy. The overseers bled, their horror and helplessness resonating through time, reverberating in the chambers of my mind. A knife glinted as it descended, cleaving flesh from bone, their cries fading into gurgling echoes, forever begging for release. And then I was back, crouched in the room of darkness, fingers digging into the floor, a chant rising to drown out the steady drum of my heart, a desperate prayer for protection. But it was met by a silence so absolute, it felt like a scream. Suddenly, something cold pressed against my back, constricting my slender frame like a spider's web, tightening with every heartbeat. It was a weightless tether to a tortured past, a fabric woven from their anguish. I spun around, and the figure emerged from the shadows, grotesquely transmuted, a warped version of the overseers, their eyes ablaze with unquenchable rage. "You came here," they shrieked, voices echoing in perfect unison, driving the point home, relentless as the shackles they once wore. And then the world began to dissolve, the walls melting into a sea of agony and shadows. The boundary between life and death began to blur, and I could feel the pulsing sorrow wrap around me like arms seeking solace. "You will join us," they wailed, a sickening harmony that ripped through the fabric of my mind, threatening to consume everything I had ever been. And in that moment of crushing horror, time felt frozen as I caught the glimmer of something sharp, obscured by the shadows. The blade, cold and unforgiving, descended towards me, meant not for their liberation, but for mine. No longer could I hear my own screams. They'd become the wails of the forgotten, and I understood I was part of their history, destined to meet the same cruel fate. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, I lunged toward the door that was once open, now shrouded, believing there had to be a way out. But my moment of hope vanished in the blink of an eye. The ground opened beneath me, a swirling void of malevolence, threatening to pull me into the depths of despair. As I teetered on the edge, I felt fingers reach for me from below, dragging me into the dark. My heart raced in panic as I realized the truth. They had always been waiting for someone to join them, and now fate had brought me closer than ever to bowing before the darkness. The shadows erupted, the wails crescendoed, and I surrendered to the abyss, collapsed into madness as the last echoes of my name whispered ominously around me. And then silence fell, thick and heavy, and I knew without a doubt that this was the end. Or perhaps just the beginning. A shroud of pressing darkness consumed me, an inescapable grip squeezing my lungs as I plummeted into the void. Confusion spun like a tempest in my mind. I had lost all sense of direction, of reality. My body met a cold, unyielding surface floor of dirt and debris that had not felt the caress of sunlight for decades, possibly centuries. The whispers returned, warping my thoughts, a chorus of beckoning voices mingling with the echo of my own frantic breaths. My heart thundered in my chest, It felt as if the echoes of the past were synchronizing with my very pulse. Shifting the jagged memories, I fought to stand up, my limbs heavy, yet my adrenaline fired sharp in my veins. What foul force pulled at the strings of my existence? In the consuming stillness, I heard the unmistakable sound of scraping, the skittering of something across the fragmented floorboards. Then, a low groan followed, a mournful lament rising from the earth itself, as if the quarters mourned for the lost souls of those who languished within them. It resonated through me, clawing at my sanity. "Help us!" A voice, a child's voice, echoed softly, interlaced with pain and despair. It crept through my mind, swirling through the darkness, beckoning me deeper into the haunted past. Surely he could not be real. I felt warmth ebb away as shadows danced around me, alive and glistening with malice. Yet there was an urgency, a pull I could not resist, leading me to follow the weak call of the child. My feet dragged reluctantly through the dust, the very air pregnant with sorrow and history. The remnants of the slave quarters creaked and groaned above, as if alive and warning me. Shadows flickered, forming shapes that lingered just out of reach. My instincts screamed for me to flee, yet dread gripped my throat and held me captive. Around a corner, I discovered a small room, dimly lit by a flickering intia memory of sunlight wavering through time, illuminating a threadbare blanket lying beneath a wooden beam. I rushed forward, believing I might find something to ease the sorrow that clung to me. As I approached, a figure materialized from the dark corners, rising like mistan apparition of an anguished mother, dirt streaking her face and eyes clouded with sorrow. "Find him," she rasped, raising a hand that trembled under the weight of both desperation and grief. The air thickened with an unbearable tension, and the child's cries grew louder, echoing through the sheltering darkness. "He is lost, but you can save him." "Save who?" I stammered, feeling madness tighten its grip. My mind was a frenzy of fear-stricken questions. But the moment I spoke, a chill washed over me, constricting my throat. Something lurked behind Maya's presence more ancient and violent than fear itself. The temperature plummeted. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night, echoing against the stone walls, causing the very ground beneath me to tremble with palpable rage. The shadows deepened, thick and suffocating, pulsating like a heartbeat rhythmically drumming an unsettling somber symphony. Instinctively, I turned, the empty space behind me now tangible with the weight of vengeful spirits. From the gloom emerged the overseers, phantoms of a blood-soaked nightmare. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their hands stained forever with the horrors of their actions. Each tormented face mirrored a grotesque twist of anguish and crime, stripped of both life and humanity, now cursed to walk endlessly, bereft of the peace they had denied so many. "You stole him from us," they shrieked, their voices coiling in my mind, infinite and echoing, combining into one relentless tide of despair. "You will pay." Instinct kicked in, and I turned to run, back towards where I had stumbled in. But the shadows shifted, swirling with predatory glee, obscuring any remnants of the exit. The walls closed in around me, and as I raced forward, I could sense them grinding against the very fabric of my being, hungry, agitated. Desperately, I glanced back to the apparition of the mother, her eyes wide with terror. "You cannot leave. Without him," she cried, her whispered urgency becoming a scream that rattled the very earth beneath me. And then, in a flash of blinding panic, the shadows lunged at me, wrapping themselves around my arms and legs, binding me in place. The overseers closed the distance, their cruel smiles illuminating the darkness. I could feel the icy grip of death clawing at my spine. "Join us," they whispered, voices twisted into a cacophony of fury and sorrow, each syllable an invocation to surrender. Suddenly, an otherworldly light burst through the darkness, a beam of radiance that shimmered brightly against the despair, illuminating a path I had missed before. But as I struggled against the shadows, pulling helplessly against their hold, I felt the urgent rasp of a small hand grasp my wrist from behind. "Don't leave me," the child cried, his voice breaking through the veil, desperate and vulnerable. I felt the sharp tug of his innocent plea embedding itself deep within me, an anchor against the encroaching despair. Amidst the chaos, one choice remained. But as I strained to reach for him, the spirits unleashed a wrath that shook the very core of my existence. I felt my feet begin to lift from the ground, felt the darkness begin to engulf me completely, and then the scream of my name echoed, but only the shadows answered, and as the light began to dim, the last thing I saw was the child's terrified face, his small hand stretching toward me, fading into the shadows. With a final, agonizing gasp, I joined the darkness, utterly consumed, and in the silence that followed, I realized there was no escape. The weight of the darkness enveloped me, a lingering shroud that suffocated every shred of hope. I felt myself suspended in a realm both familiar and foreign, each breath stolen by an unseen horror. The flickering light dimmed, leaving only the echoes of the child's pleading voice entwined with the haunting wails of the overseers, whose faces now blurred in my memoria grotesque collage of hatred and vengeance. Find him. The mother's specter wailed again, her form flickering like a flame on the verge of extinction. But the shadows that had swallowed me now flicked and twisted around her, their dark tendrils alive with energy. With a sudden snap, she was pulled backward into the ether, her screams fading into the insatiable void, and then silence. An abysmal, stifling silence, as I struggled against the ropes of despair wrapping around my limbs. I tried to call out, to scream against the nightmarish grasp of the overseers, but my voice fell silent, an abandoned echo in the vast, empty corridors of the slave quarters. The air thickened with a rancid stench, something dead and rotting. I gagged as the walls around me pulsated with life, their surfaces grimy and alive with the anguish of those long lost. I stumbled forward, propelled by instinct, half man, half prisoner in this abyss. With every step, the suffocating darkness shuddered and hissed, as if whispering secrets better left concealed. The child's face lingered vividly in my mind, the glint of his terrified eyes like beacons, urging me to navigate this hell. "Don't leave me," he had cried, and that innocent plea twisted within me, igniting sparks of defiance against the despair threatening to engulf me. I pressed on, claws of anxiety digging deep into my chest, dragging me back toward the corner where I had first encountered the mother's spirit. The remnants of the room felt like a void within my soul, empty yet pulsing, a haunting reminder of a desperate past. Here, I would search for answers, for a trace of the child lost in the shadows. A faint noise drummed against the walls. It was faint, almost delicate, but I recognized the sound, small fingers scrabbling against the hard earth, desperate and frantic. My heart raced as I rushed toward the sound, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. I rounded the corner, and to my shock, I found the very blanket where I had first laid my eyes, yet it pulsated as if imbued with life. There was movement beneath it. I knelt, pulled back the tattered fabric, and found not the child but remnants of a past that made my stomach churn. A collection of items laid with care, tokens from the souls that lingered in torment. A rusted locket, a wooden toy, and bones, too fragile and frail to belong to anything other than a child. The oppressiveness of the air grew thicker, pressing against my chest like a vice. I shoved the blanket back. "Where are you?" I murmured, tears staining my cheeks, as despair clawed at my throat. And from the corner of the room, I spotted a glimmer, a shimmering light that pierced the gloom, drawing my attention. Hesitantly, I approached, the chill becoming almost unbearable, the shadows whispering in a language I could not comprehend. Just as I neared, the light flickered violently and then extinguished entirely, plunging me back into an abyss of terror. "Join us," the whispers crescendoed, weaving together the lost cries of those who had suffered. In that hopeless moment, I perceived them, the overseers, now a mass of shadows, a storm of rage and sorrow descending upon me with a terrible fervor. Their mournful faces morphed into grotesque smiles, welcoming me into their entanglement of despair. But their touch was not of death, it was a beckoning, as if they were merely trying to pull me into the revelation of truths long buried. "The child," I gasped, but the force grew stronger, binding me in a tumultuous whirl of agony and desire. I felt pieces of my mind slipping away, tethered to their wails as the darkness enveloped me in a cocoon of dread. Then, Amidst the turmoil, I caught a soft flicker of laughter, a child's laughter, innocent and bright, swirling around me like a breeze, urging me to follow. Beyond the grasp of the overseers, I glimpsed what appeared to be a doorway, the semblance of a corridor stretching just out of reach. It glimmered with the same urgency I had felt from the child. With a guttural cry, I lunged toward the light, propelled by desperation. But the overseers erupted into furious rage, a sultry roar that reverberated through the air, their forms twisting into monstrous visages. "You will not escape," they bellowed, as their dark hands reached for me as I dove into the light. The realization struck might was not just an escape but a descent into something more ominous, a place rife with secrets yet to be uncovered. The moment I crossed through, I felt the ground shift beneath me, collapsing into a swirling abyss. I was no longer running toward freedom, but plunging headlong into a new nightmare, forgotten chamber that resonated with silent screams and echoes of betrayal. With nowhere left to turn, my eyes widened in horror as spectral forms emerged from the walls. Their shapes twisted into figures I recognized all too well. They turned toward me, and in unison whispered their last words, "You cannot save him, you are him." And just like that, the shadows closed in around me again, this time promising to share their dark truths, but at a cost I could scarcely fathom. As the words echoed in the haunting chamber, a weight of realization crashed down, crushing me beneath its inescapable gravity. I swayed, the walls pulsating like the heartbeat of some ancient beast, the figures surrounding me bearing expressions frozen in torment. They were the overseers, eyes wide with never-ending madness, mouths agape as if mourning, or perhaps laughing, a grotesque parody of their former roles. "Join us, be one of us," they chanted, their voices merging into a twisted lullaby that reverberated through me. I fought against the tide of despair that surged like a tidal wave, but it was as if the shadows themselves were beckoning me deeper into their fold. The room seemed to constrict, drawing me closer to the very source of their Aganyan altar, marked by dark stains that told stories of unspeakable horror, a testament to the suffering that had transpired here. That I stumbled backward, the cold grip of their despair clawing at my sanity. Yet I couldn't take my eyes away from the altar, where a pair of rusted shackles lay undisturbed. An overwhelming sense of grief flooded through me, and I realized with sickening horror that these were remnants of a past that had bled into this place, merging history with an unchanging present. "Why? What happened to you?" I croaked, my throat constricted with emotion. But they advanced, a slow, undulating tide of shadow and despair. "You must know," they whispered, an insistent pull. "To save the child, to save yourself." My gaze shifted back to the flickering shadows, and within them, I spotted glimpses of the child. His innocence undiminished, but his features contorted in eternal fear. That same fear gripped my heart as I contemplated the truth dawning in my mind. The overseers, once living, now tormented souls, were the gatekeepers of this twisted reality, forever trapped in a cycle of cruelty and horror. Desperate to break the cycle, I took one trembling step toward the altar. Instinctively, I reached for the shackles, their cold metal sending a shock wave of dread coursing through my veins. Suddenly, a voice seeped from the darkness, a chilling whisper that pierced through the cacophony. "To be free, you must remember." It hissed, and before I could comprehend, I was thrust back into visions of unimaginable pain, images of betrayal and heartache, rippling through time like a dark river. I saw myself among the overseers, a figure of authority, a participant in the unspeakable, my hands stained with the blood of innocence while my mind strived to forget. "No, that's not me," I screamed, clutching my head, but the whispers grew louder, burrowing deeper, forcing memories that I had long buried to resurface. I was entangled in a web of sorrow, a part of something far more sinister than I had ever dared to imagine. That in that moment, the spectral child reappeared, his voice a beacon amid the maelstrom. "You need to find me," he cried plaintively, "before they take you away." Suddenly, the overseers surged, their forms merging, shaping into a single grotesque amalgamation, some horrific hybrid of themselves, forever cursed to protect the secrets they now shared. Crumbling under the weight of their gaze, I felt the walls of the chamber close in on me, the temperature plummeting as fear clawed at my spine. I turned to run, But the laughter of the child curdled into a sinister tone, and I realized he was not merely a victim, was a part of this cycle, too. Another speck of darkness entwined in their story as I bounded towards the corridor at the far end. The flickering lights began to strobe violently. The overseers' wails crescendoed into a chaotic symphony, their grotesque faces warping into malicious grins that promised nothing but torment. "Find him," they urged, each syllable dripping with malice. "Before he finds you," my heart raced as I reached the exit. But as I grasped the door handle, I felt a force wrapping around my wrist, yanking me back. The shadows twisted, coiling like snakes. I turned in horror to see a spectral hand emerging from the wall, dragging itself toward Maya's skeletal hand. Devoid of life yet filled with an insatiable hunger, I screamed, adrenaline surging through my veins as the entity lunged, its cold grip around my ankles seizing me. The world spun as I was pulled back, the child's final chilling laughter echoing through my mind. "You can't escape. You must remember." And in that moment, darkness enveloped me completely, dragging me into the depths of the unforgiving abyss, where only blood was the price for ringing the bell of forgotten memories. Dread settled heavily in the air, an oppressive miasma that hummed with malevolence as I was swallowed by the darkness. My thoughts spiraled wildly, each fleeting hope dashed against the jagged rocks of terror, until I was left a quivering wreck adrift in this unforgiving void. The whisper of the skeletal hand still echoed in my mind, an unsettling reminder that I was not merely a witness but an unwilling participant in the horrors that had carved this reality. Suddenly, the cold dampness of blood-soaked earth pressed against my back, grounding me in the tangible yet grotesque remnants of despair. My heart pounded as chilling laughter echoed faintly, a sound that seared itself into my consciousness. I recognized a child's laughter now twisted into something sinister, a precursor to other horrors yet unknown. That I forced myself to open my eyes. To my shock, the surroundings morphed into a dimly lit corridor lined with rot and decay, the air thick with rancid odors as if the walls themselves were weeping. Shadows flitted at the periphery of my vision, darting in and out of existence, feeding off my fear as they danced in an agonizing display of cruelty. Faint echoes whispered through the darkness, cruel mockeries of long-dead souls enacting a tragic play in ghoulish silence. "Remember," they hissed, their disembodied voices twisting my insides, urging me deeper into the bowels of nightmares where memories had been forgotten. Each step deeper filled me with both nausea and longing. An unholy bond tethered me to this nightmarish place as visions pulsed and throbbed like an open wound. As I navigated the narrow path, the temperature plunged, a sudden chill wrapping around my bones as though fingers of ice were drawing closer. Anxiety gnawed at my insides when flashes of visions pierced the dim space. Flickering scenes unfolded before Maya blurred reenactment of cruelty unveiled. I saw overseers, their faces a mask of grotesque glee, inflicting pain upon those too weak to fight back. Their laughter echoed in a cacophony that blended into an otherworldly symphony of agony. I screamed, but the sound faded, swallowed by the very darkness I feared. I pressed on, desperation clawing at my insides. The child, was he a key or a pawn in this unfolding chaos? Each thought felt like drowning in a whirlpool as slivers of reality twisted and congealed. My foot caught on something soft but wet, sending me crashing to the ground. As my breath hitched, I glanced down. Blood dark, rich, and almost glistening as it formed congealed puddles around me. But it wasn't just blood. Bones fragmented beneath the surface, their hollowed eyes staring into nothingness, as if pleading for release from torturous memories impregnated in my imagination. A sensation prickled my skin, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I peered into the darkness ahead. Did something move? A shiver coursed down my spine as an inky figure began to emerge from the shadows, a malevolent shape that resembled the amalgamation of overseers I had witnessed before. It was larger, its body caught somewhere between earth and spirit, grotesquely morphed into a flickering nightmare, its features flickering between the faces of those charged with cruelty, their eyes filled with unending wrath. "Remember what they did to us," it rasped, its voice a dissonant echo that tugged at the corners of my mind, urging me to yield to the truth buried within. But with each syllable, I felt my resolve weaken. my memories tainted by the darkness swirling around us. Find him before he finds you. It echoed through my thoughts, Aga Aina, haunting mantra laced within my psyche. I gasped, clawing at the damp earth as I attempted to scramble away. The shadows licked at my heels, smothering any hope of liberation. I stumbled onto a passage framed with grotesque carvings, depictions of suffering enshrined beneath a darkened archway. I thrust myself through, instinctively seeking freedom, but as I entered the next chamber, horror rippled through me. Chains hung from the ceiling, rattling faintly, holding wispy silhouettes, their inhumed faces contorted in an eternal scream of realization. My heart raced, eyes wide as the swirling mist began to congeal into the child's form, now more corporeal yet alarmingly grotesque. "Help me?" he wept, but his voice was but a hollow echo, resonating with despair. "Break the cycle or join me." Darkness coiled tighter around me, wringing out any sense of security. The faces of the overseers shifted into monstrous hisses. The child's hand reached out, but before I could react, the door I had entered behind me slammed shut. Trapped, I was enveloped in silence, the murmur of memories festering silence, as the shadows closed in from all sides. I turned to face the child, feeling time stretch and fracture, as something worse drew near, an exhalation of dread, the promise of revelation but also the weight of curses waiting to unravel. And then it loomed, a figure beside the child, shrouded and dark, bearing down on me, eyes glistening like shards of ice. My breath caught in my throat, as the memory of who or what haunted me pounded in my heart, a crescendo of inevitability. "Are you ready to join us?" It breathed, each word curling around my spirit as the shadows erupted in chilling laughter, drowning me in despair as they whispered truths best left forgotten. The air became thick with an unsettling tension, a malevolence that tasted of iron and decay as the figure stepped closer, the child's wail transforming into a cacophony of lamentations swirling around me. I felt powerless as the anguished cries of those held captive echoed in a chilling harmony, reverberating in my bones. "Join us," the dark figure repeated, its voice a ghastly rasp that seemed to crawl beneath my skin, coiling around my heart like a serpent ready to strike. Its presence was a blight upon this forgotten space, radiating an unyielding pressure that crushed my spirit. In the sickly glow that permeated the chamber, I began to discern the contours of its form, not just overshadowing the child, but somehow merging with the vignettes of torment trapped in the rotating halo of ghostly light. "Leave him alone," I shouted, my heart hammering as I stumbled backward, desperate to create distance between us. The stones beneath my feet were slick with wetness, almost pulling me down. Rows of shackles rattled, casting long shadows that danced like grotesque marionettes upon the walls, showcasing remnants of suffering etched into the fabric of this cursed place. The child's eyes, once full of pleading innocence, flickered and twisted, morphing into a reflection of perished souls seeking revenge. "You must see," he cried, his fingers twitching toward an unseen terror, urging me to bear witness to an unspeakable truth. Something deep within me resisted, a primal instinct begging me to flee, but I was ensnared, trapped within this waking nightmare. I averted my glance, focusing instead on the grotesque carvings arching the chamber, desperate to anchor myself to something tangible. I noticed the jagged edges of the figures seemed fluid, evolving no longer just stone but living memories seeping through time, pulsating with pent-up rage. Each carving depicted a scene of open revolt, of flesh meeting iron, painted with every nuance of envy and treachery. Then it spoke again, the dark figure leaning into the pool of light, revealing a visage shifting, as if stitching together faces and torment like a patchwork quilt of sorrow. "They suffered long before you arrived. The overseers fall under the weight of their own deeds. Yet their legacy lives on, flowing from one to the next." "Stop," I gasped. Such terror was unbearable. My footing slipped, and I fell again to the ground, my hands whirling into the viscous blood pooled around me. "I want nothing to do with this." In that moment of vulnerability, a haunting shriek erupted from the depths of the shadows, cutting through the tension like an unsheathed blade. The child's form flickered and twisted violently as the shadows surged toward me, grotesque claws stretching toward my throat. "You must break the cycle," he pleaded, voice distorted, a melding of innocence, and the guttural cries of the tormented. I can't. I can't. I screamed, feeling a darkness pooling within my very essence, something alive eager to feed on my dread. And then, right before my eyes, the child morphed. The last remnants of his innocence disintegrated as a flurry of memories poured into him, images of raw horror, revealing the unrelenting torment he had suffered. The chains rattled as he was imbued with the wrath of those who came before him, filled with every torment ever forgotten, every sacrifice erased. His lips curled into a wicked grin, eyes burning now with unholy fire. They did this to us, the child rasped, voice now mighty and thunderous, resonating with discontent that extended far beyond his small frame. They thought we were gone, but they're wrong, and now you will pay. The blood around me began to seethe, radiating heat, each droplet morphing into spectral figures, ghostly hands clawing at the very fabric of my sanity as I desperately clawed my way back, my breath caught in my throat. Join us, the command echoed, reverberating through the realm of shadows. Alongside twisted laughter that gnawed hungrily at my soul, I screamed as the child lunged forward, hands reaching for my throat, intent on dragging me into the void of their collective vengeance. In that moment, the chains rattled violently, and a chorus of wails erupted as the torsos of the overseers began to rise, attached to their own spindly, ghostly arms, eager to exact their twisted justice. Save us, they howled, writhing as they converged, a ghastly parade descending upon me as the chamber dissolved into chaos. Just as I felt the cold grip of their hands around my wrists, the entire edifice trembled as the walls began to close in, exhaling a loathsome breath of despair as something darker stirred in the depths of the shadows beyond. It was a force more malevolent than the ones before me, denser and hungry for anguish, the true overseer of this wretched domain. That I, in that urgent moment, clarity hit me past was intertwined with this horror, calling upon my very essence, and it would not let go without a fight. I drew a sharp breath, as the screams crescendoed, reverberating through the chamber, echoing across realms, and then, as the cacophony reached a deafening peak, the chamber shattered, and a kaleidoscope of hell unfolded before my eyes. I was about to plunge deeper into the maw of the abyss when a soft glimmer, a sliver of light pierced through the darkness. A way out, or another trap? Time froze as I faced my reckoning, a choice that would alter the very fabric of my soul. Would I escape this nightmare, or would I become a part of it forever? The pulsing shadows thickened, colliding around me like waves crashing in a storm, each wail a testament to the pain woven through this cursed ground. The ghastly parade of overseers surged, their eyes hollowed by revenge, mouths twisted into silent screams, stretching toward me in grotesque unison. I was drowning amid a tide of grief and fury, a soul trapped within a storm of forgotten anguish as the walls crumbled and the light flickered, revealing dizzying glimpses of worlds entwined in suffering. The child stood at the epicenter, beacon of raw, unfiltered torment. The twisted expression of righteousness contorted his features, and I felt an instinctual pull to flee. Yet, I was rooted, compelled by an unseen force that thrummed dangerously within the ground beneath me, vibrating with the collective weight of past injustices. Choose. The child snarled, the shadowy embodiment of the overseers straining against the remnants of their shackles, stretching the bounds of reality itself. Join them, or be consumed. In a futile attempt to free my mind from the turmoil, I cast my gaze toward the wavering light, realizing it was not a beacon of hope but rather an omen of despair, a blinding portal that promised to strip away all that I had been. The air thickened, pulling at the marrow of my bones, and that irresistible, glimmering void beckoned with seductive whispers with each heartbeat. The echoes of pleas resonated, screaming not just for closure but vengeance, an insatiable thirst for retribution that licked at the edges of my sanity. You will regret your hesitation, the overseers' chorus droned, their dismembered limbs still writhing in anguish, as if fighting against some unseen force that compelled them toward me. Suddenly, tendrils of darkness surged from the corners of the room, wrapping around me like a shroud as the child lunged again. They will take you, he hissed, teeth grinding in malice. And you will wear their skin as we do. The ground erupted beneath my feet, fissures swallowing the anguished remnants of the past. The cries crescendoed into a single, ear-splitting note, curated from generations of unspeakable pain. The shadows writhed and twisted, revealing silhouettes figures of those who once walked unshackled, and now echoed in eternal flame. Their eyes burned with longing, yet glinted with malice, feeding off the fire of liberty denied. Enough, I shouted, my voice echoing despite the chaos, desperate to reclaim control. You would have me curse my existence for your vengeance? You think I am just another pawn? But the moment of whispered defiance shattered against the howls of the damned as the chamber pulsated with dark light. My vision blurred, and I felt fingers from beyond grip my mind, pulling apart the fabric of who I was, twisting my very essence into the folds of this abominable tapestry of existence. The light that had momentarily offered false hope flickered wildly, throbbing with the heartbeat of despair. There, at its core, I perceived them, the lost souls of the overseers, their faces hauntingly familiar, morphing with my own history, woven string by string into an insurmountable legacy of grief. I was reminded of every moment of neglect, every injustice tasted from the cup of suffering, now putrid and bitter against my tongue. That a blinding flash engulfed me as reality twisted violently, the air thick with a piercing essence that brought forth clarity amidst the agony. Each forgotten face reminded me that this was not merely about justice. It was an insatiable hunger for existence, a clawing need to feel and suffer eternally. I wanted to turn it away, but the truth remained. Darkness had seeped into my spirit, drawing me toward the call of the abyss, and snaring me with its claws. Join us, they collectively screamed as I staggered back, bracing against the relentless tide of memories. And suddenly, I was overcome with profound sorrow, a weight more suffocating than chains. It is not escape you seek. It is understanding. A fleeting moment of clarity coursed through as the child's grin stretched grotesquely. The very walls closed in with chilling affirmation, each labyrinth of confusion winding tighter around me until I stood on the precipice between light and unimaginable darkness with my heart pounding. I glanced at the specters that surrounded haunting custodians of this hellish theater, and in that moment, I saw one of them step away from the rest, revealing an inscription across its chest, etched with an unholy flame. I leaned closer, horrified yet entranced. The name was mine, before I could register the magnitude of this revelation. The ground beneath my feet groaned in protest, and from the churning shadows erupted wails more agonizing than I had ever known. In the distance, beneath the veil of chaos, a new sound began to emerge, a rhythmic thud that seemed to sync with the pulse of the nightmares, drawing the attention of each tormented soul. And then, breaking through the cacophony, I heard laughter, dark, sinister, entwined with madness, a sound that felt achingly familiar and utterly terrifying. It echoed louder and louder until I turned, breathless, searching for its source, and from the deepest shadows rose a figure, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an insanity that promised my undoing. "Welcome back," it whispered, and its voice twisted with sullied affection, sending a chill rippling down my spine as the echo of my name slid from its tongue. The true horror of my existence unfurled before me. The light flickered once more, the walls redundant and crumbling into oblivion, and in that terrifying instant, I understood. The choice had always been the same. There was no escape, no path toward light. Only the eternal cycle of anguish, and I was destined to become just another face in their growing shadows. And as the laughter crescendoed, a deeper truth emerged. I was already lost. The chill of realization gripped me like a vice, tightening around my heart. I was not an innocent explorer, a hapless victim lured into this wretched place. No, I was a part of its vile tapestry, a puppet stringed by tragedy. The overseers were more than just the remnants of a dark past. They were the echoes of my own soul, trapped within the cruel history that replayed endlessly. Fury churned within me, a boiling tempest of grief and anger. I looked into the glowing eyes of the shadowed figure, recognition dawning as the laughter morphed into something hauntingly familiar. It embodied hatred, yet there lingered an unsettling whisper of affinity. "Welcome back," it taunted, a cruel twist of fate clinging to its words. A past I was tethered to, a cycle I could not escape. Stumbling backward, I fought against the rising tide of horror, seeking to reclaim what little hope flickered within my spirit. "No, you're wrong. I can break free." The conviction in my voice faded as the laughter surged, enveloping me in both warmth and dread. Free? It asked, tilting its head in mock disbelief. You have lived in this abyss before, and the chains that bind you are woven from your own deeds. You are but a fleeting shadow, waiting to be summoned once more. As the shadows swarmed, enveloping me in their dance, I saw visions of my past flash before my eyes, each one painted in vivid despair, memories of choices made long ago that had carved my fate into stone. I had committed the same acts of cruelty I now fought against, and with this haunting revelation, understanding blurred the edges of my sanity. The overseers began to shift, their haunting forms merging into a mosaic of pain and longing, their elongated limbs reaching out to me an invitation to join them, to embrace the terror they represented. You are ours, they whispered, beckoning me to surrender. Become part of our story, and let the cycle continue. Instinctually, I lunged for the flickering doorway, a desperate attempt to escape their grasp. But the walls quaked, shifting like a living organism, breathing in my fear as the overseers surged toward me, their ghostly laughter echoing in my ears. I had never truly wanted to leave. Deep down, my heart yearned to feel their vengeance, to align with the dark forces that loomed over my past. I screamed, wrenching free from the spectral chains tightening around my limbs. Yet the shadows continued to pull me closer, nurturing an insatiable hunger that gnawed at my essence, blurring the lines between refusal and acceptance. The child's face appeared before me, morphed anew into a grotesque amalgam of innocence and darkness. You can't escape your past, he cried, his voice twisted with ancient malice. Remember, you are already lost. That a grim understanding blossomed as I realized there was no winning against the cycle. The true horror lay not in the torment of memories but in the knowledge that I had a choice. I'll waste a choice to either embrace the abyss or deny it. And yet, as I wrangled with this truth, a new force pulsed behind me, summoning the dark essence of the overseers while urging me further into despair. I faltered, buffeted by waves of anguish and betrayal, caught between the desire to flee and the temptation to yield. In that moment of paralyzing choice, I felt the pull of countless souls entwined in this cursed narrativia legacy of pain woven into the fabric of my existence, spreading like a virus within me. It was a cruel fate, extending fingers into the depths of my soul, beckoning me to embrace their torment as my own. The child's form grew more defined, his bloodied smile transforming into a mask of wrought despair. Will you break the cycle, or will you let the shadows embrace you entirely? I closed my eyes, allowing the tears to flow, opening the gates of buried memories that came crashing back, remnants of choices that stained my hands. The overseers' chorus became deafening, their wails entwining with my thoughts. Join us, be one of us, you are already lost. And in that moment, the darkness converged, swallowing the last vestiges of light surrounding me. I felt as though the walls collapsed entirely, dragging me down into the depths of their despair. Deep into my own identity, a convoluted kaleidoscope of remorse and pain, I screamed, an echoing chorus of anguish, as I collided with the blackness that awaited, a shattering realization that not only did the past never die, but it also writhed with a hunger only I could quench. In the shadows I found my peace. I was home, and as the laughter swelled around me, I understood the final truth. The overseers, the horror, the child, they were all reflections of the darkness within, shimmering in the depths of my soul, eternally whispering the names of those I had lost. And in this cursed cycle, I understood the chilling reality of being lost forever, as if the darkness was not merely a shadow, but a lover I could never escape. The echo of my final screams faded into the ether, swallowed by the laughter of the damned, wrapping around me in a delicate embrace, and as the last light flickered out, the truth clenched at my throat. I had awakened something that never truly slept.